Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in this virtual world. My name's Josh Mailman. I'm the president of NorCal CarciNET Community, and we're here to talk a little bit about patient advocacy and how you can help bring about change. Again, here's our agenda. I want to give you kind of ideas, probably beyond the role of just advocating for yourself, but advocating for others in patient advocacy and what that entails and what can be accomplished. Through this presentation, I'm going to use a bunch of acronyms, and I'll try to say them when I do them, but in case I don't, here's an acronym slide that you can take a quick look at of things that I work in and work on, so you get an idea of the acronyms that I may use during this presentation. With most patient advocates, we're patients first, and that's true of me as well. I'm a pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor patient. I was diagnosed in 2007. I've had several rounds of PRT in Germany in 2009 and 10, follows on in 2016 and 20. And at a point when I was doing really well, I asked my oncologist this silly question. I asked, how could I help? And that question has gotten to me in a lot of challenges, because one of the challenges that one has as being an advocate is learning when to say no. But at that point, I asked that question, how can I help? And she pointed me towards patient advocacy or towards helping others as opposed to helping yourself. I mean, we can all advocate on behalf of ourselves for treatment and other things. And I know that there's speakers that are talking today about how to advocate for yourself, but this is how to advocate for others, how to improve care for others. So patient advocacy is an area of specialization in healthcare concerned with advocacy for patients, survivors, and caregivers. Well, that's a definition where you can really drive a truck through. So I really like this drawing from a friend of mine, Deb Collier, from the CARE, the Patient Advocates and Research, which kind of looks at patient advocacy as a jigsaw puzzle. There's the support, which we know we get from LACNet, and fundraising, which we get from LACNets or NetRF or other organizations. But then there's political advocacy, there's research advocacy, there's policy advocacy in being, a watchdog or a patient's rights. So if we look at that, advocacy really is one phrase. We say patient advocate, but what does that mean? It's many hats. Sometimes it's an organization that does advocacy, sometimes it's an individual, but really it's an individual or a group that's really providing advocacy services. And they don't just have to be for the individual patients, right? We have advocates who work in policy to get more funding for clinical trials or better payment for existing treatments. So these are typical advocacy activities looking back towards that jigsaw puzzle that we had before. You could do awareness building, as I've talked about, which both my group, NorCal CarciNET Community, LACNets, NCAN, several others do about neuroendocrine tumors. We can do support and education of patients, much like all of our programs that we talk about. Some type of advocacy is doing patient representation, where we can actually go with patients to their appointments and help them advocate on their behalf. Recently, I was appointed as the patient's right advocate for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Advisory Committee for the Medical Use of Isotopes. And in that kind of position, you're representing patients and what's in the patient's best interest when you're thinking of policy. We talk about matters of privacy, and sometimes that's coupled with informed consent, where we're looking at both your data, how information about you is shared, and also about informed consent to make sure things that happen in a clinical trial may not go beyond where you want them to go. In reality, patient advocates that do more than personal advocacy give a voice to patients, survivors, and carers. A lot of you may know me from being working in nuclear medicine, and why I got involved in nuclear medicine. I like to show this is, actually, I was invited to the first World Congress on Gallium-68 in Bad Berka, Germany in 2011. I don't know if I consider myself a global advocate at that point, but I was one of a couple of patients. And what I saw very quickly was this type of advancement, all these different types of new peptides that were going to be used across from things like prostate cancer and breast cancer and other things outside of neuroendocrine tumor. I got really interested in how we could help promote and also help with the explosion of what was going to happen in the nuclear medicine industry. And that's coming to fruition now. We're starting to see, we saw our first approvals for PSMA imaging, and we'll see ones for therapy using much the same things we do for neuroendocrine tumors. So research and policy advocacy is different than personal advocacy. Really, this is learning about conflicts of interest, learning how to present what is right for the entire community, just not advocating for yourself. Luckily, I was onboarded by the Patient Advocacy Steering Committee of the National Cancer Institute, which has trainings that help you through this process and learning the language of trials. And some of these things are online. And right now, it's better than ever as far as the amount of training, and I'll talk about that at the end, but many of the cooperative groups and large advocacy agencies now conduct trainings to help advocates understand what's going on. Now, some of you may not even know what a cooperative group is, and that's your research institution or even your community center is a member of a clinical trials cooperative group that works to put out clinical trials into their groups. And these are 1,000 centers, cooperative groups that can then really get out clinical trials. I show this book, When Science Offers Salvation. It's by a woman named Rebecca Dresser. And it's a really good read if you're thinking about getting into research advocacy, because it talks about and goes through the history of patient advocacies from the early times in the breast cancer movement, in the AIDS movement, and really gives a guidepost for how to look at this inside your own world and inside your own disease, and what are the guide rails that you should be looking at. And yes, actually, we've studied this, and it's really good. The Patient Centered Outcome Research Institute has put money behind putting patients as a stakeholder in research. And as a matter of fact, not only have they spent over $320 million, they have put all of their data online so you can search to see how patients can impact things. So where do I spend my time? How do I keep up to date? And where am I, if you take a look at that jigsaw puzzle, where do I fit inside of that, and what type of activities do I do, both to keep up to date and to advocate? And I've kind of done this a lot like that jigsaw puzzle, right? I work in support, awareness, and fundraising. I'm the president of NorCal CarciNET. I work with the Society of Nuclear Medicine. I was their inaugural chair of patient advocacy. I'm a board member of the Neuroendocrine Tumor Research Foundation and the Education and Research Foundation for Nuclear Medicine. And I help run the World Association of Radiopharmaceutical and Molecular Therapy. I do a lot on the research end. As I said, I'm a member of the NCI, originally a member of the Task Force for Neuroendocrine Tumors, but as my skill set has increased, I was elected 4 years ago and am now in my second term as a member of the Steering Committee for GI Cancer. I am the only non-breast cancer patient advocate for the ASCO Scientific Research Committee. I'm a member of the faculty on how to actually teach clinical research to young investigators. It's called the VAIL Workshop. And I'm a member of the NetSpore. I'm the patient advocate for the NetSpore. This is something from the University of Iowa that actually puts out a lot of research funding across the neuroendocrine tumor space. And I've been fortunate to serve on guideline committees. In the regulatory framework, I am one of 160 FDA patient representatives that help when there is a question on whether a drug should be approved or not, or how to write the label. And as I said previously, I'm a member of the advisory committee on the medical use of isotopes. I serve as the patient's right advocate, where I represent patients. And what do you do on things like on advisory committees? So here's an example. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is rethinking or updating the release criteria for those who are having some type of nuclear medicine therapy. And so I may, from my vantage point and from the vantage point of talking to other patients, bring up concerns that patients have about having nuclear medicine therapy, something like PRT or PRLT for prostate cancer, and make sure that they're addressed in the guidelines as opposed to or in the release criteria, instead of just having physicians who may not know that you may want to spend time with your animals, for instance, your dogs and cats, and that's important to put in the release criteria, and so that we have better understanding of how we can do that, just for instance. But mostly, much like many of you, I listen to fellow patients' journeys and challenges. And that's how I inform my advocacy as well. And you'll see me online asking questions about I'm giving a presentation or I've got to go testify in some forum. And I want to hear from other patients as well so I can bring your viewpoint forward. So where are opportunities to engage? There's so many places. We'll talk about it in a bit, but the FDA, EMA is the European Medical Agency, the National Cancer Institute, for instance, PCORI, which we've talked about, the cooperative groups, they all offer different ways to engage that you can become, work with the FDA or work with the NCI, and they will work with you to teach you the types of things you'll need to know for this area. So the good news is there's a rich history of patient engagement. We really are on the shoulders of others. Those in the breast cancer world, in the AIDS world, they really set the groundwork for patient advocacy and bringing patients to be involved in research, in policy, in other areas. So we weren't just the patient. We were actually an active participant in our care. We really do have willing partners, which is really great. But we really do need to also support our researchers as well, not to always look at how we can do, but there's many ways to get involved, not only with your time, but also direct support of people who are supporting those who give us care. Patient participation in research can lead to better outcomes, which is great. My new term, which I'm sure I'm going to talk to Mark Lewis here in a little bit, is called COOL, which is not only quality of life, but it's quantity and quality of life. So that's my new acronym, QQOL. So it will bring along better outcomes over time. So remember, a lot of these things aren't instantaneous. It takes time to get things changed. Can you make an impact? As I was talking about, I do things with clinical young investigators in helping them with their clinical designs. And just like we have surveys after this type of webinar, I survey those who are in my classes and I ask them, has working with a patient advocate changed how you think of patients? And you get some of these quotes on that, we need to be involved early on and it should be continuous fluid, not a one-time check-in, which interestingly enough, I had a conversation with a pharma partner earlier this morning and it was very much of, right now what we do is after everything's done, we show it to a patient and say, is this good? And if it's not good, it's been too late because we didn't involve them in the entire process. And we discussed how they can change that. So we've talked about, advocacy in different organizations, but even advocacy tools. And this is Giovanna and Lisa and Dr. Lee talking about Net Vitals. I mean, here was an opportunity that came out of a meeting with Healing Nets with Cindy Lovelace in San Diego that Giovanna ran with to see if we could figure out how to bring information forward. And so this is a really great we created tools here that are patient advocate driven. And you can advocate beyond NEDS. Now, whether you want to do this with ASCO or for nuclear medicine or for different things, there are so many different ways to advocate on behalf of other patients and that are beyond NETs as well. So I'm not sure where to start. First thing is learn how to tell your story so that when you advocate in front of either other patients or other medical providers or in front of your legislative representatives, you can tell a quick, concise story. LACNets is a great place to start and work with. Obviously, there's the Net Connect team as well. There's national organizations that would be happy to help you. So look under cancer cooperative groups, and you'll see they all have pages on patient advocacy. You can see which group the center you're cared for is actually involved in. This just came out yesterday, as a matter of fact. Introductions to Principle and Practice of Clinical Research. This is a free online course that after you're done, you will get a certificate that says, I actually understand how to do clinical research. So for those of you who are interested, if you use this link here to bit.ly/netadvocate, you'll be able to actually to sign up. And when there are opportunities that I see, I hit this list and let them know what's going on so that they can participate in different opportunities that show up for patients. So with that, I want to thank you. I look forward to the question and answer happening soon, and look forward to meeting with you in person when we get out of this flat screen Earth.